Hey guys, what's up? Wanted to finish my part two, John D. Rockefeller on the book Titan. Now, this is going to be part two, guys, but you can actually just watch this as a standalone video. If you want more information on Rockefeller, I have the other video. So, guys, I'm going to go through a few things about Rockefeller in this book review that you might find interesting. I'm going to talk about him, his life, the company he created, Standard Oil, about his philanthropy, and a little bit about his family and his characteristics. So let's start with his life. John D. Rockefeller, he grew up very poor. Pretty much was his dad always traveled, so he pretty much was like his family was like a single parent family with his mom, and he had to grow up pretty early in life to be like the man of the house. His mom was really religious, so he was always very into the church and strict by the church rules and stuff like that. Later on, John D. went to the apprentice at bookkeeping. He was very good at what he did. He would work very hard. He was very honest. As bookkeeping, he moved that into a business where he partnered doing produce and warehousing in Cleveland. And then he had the vision to basically move on and get into the oil business or refining business and make kerosene. Later on, gasoline and stuff like that. But that early start, Rockefeller, he could just see something and then he went with it. Because back in his day, you got to remember, it was like horses, there was well-oiled lights, lighting the house, candles. There was nothing that we take for granted today, and that was kind of like the visionary part of Rockefeller. Later on, Rockefeller became president of the biggest company in the United States and the world, Standard Oil. And he retired from Standard Oil, and in his retirement, he made more money through his Standard Oil company, through dividends and stuff, than he made when he was working with Standard Oil, which is pretty awesome accomplishment that your life's work paid you, more in retirement than you made working. And also, guys, he, in his later years, he kind of had his youth back. In his 80s and 90s, he would play golf. He would kind of had the careless times that you would have as a kid, but he didn't really have that. So his life was backwards in that regard, where he had to grow up quick early, and then at the end of his life, he could relax, play golf, do different things with his grandkids and stuff like that. And he had a few daughters, but his son was John D. Rockefeller Jr. And then his family was pretty good. I'll go into that real quick. One of his daughters that he really loved, she died kind of early. Another daughter, she never, how we always talk about handing out generational wealth. She didn't know how to handle the money. She always got in bad business deals. She was just blowing through money every time she got money from him. She went to Switzerland, and she got with like this doctor that was, or some kind of psychologist. I don't know. There were some weird stories with one of his daughters, and Rockefeller always gave support, but he, never approved of what she was doing, especially being from the Baptist church. And then Rockefeller's son pretty much had a lot of Rockefeller's qualities. One thing Rockefeller always did was he kept a ledger with everything he spent. That I talked about this last time, and he would always find out, like, oh, why did I pay so much for those gloves when I could have bought some gloves used or something? And through his whole life, Rockefeller was like that. He, even when being a millionaire, or having billions of dollars in nowadays money, one guy was cutting wood for his house, and he said, how much is that? And they go, 14 inches. He goes, maybe we could do 12 inches and still have the house warm. So even being, the richest man in the world, he would still be conservative and try to save money all the time. And that's pretty interesting. But his son, John D., took a lot of values from him, always kept a ledger, had his kids keep ledgers. And that was one way that, Rockefeller, knew his son was ready to take over the family fortune and carry on the Rockefeller name, which is pretty interesting. And Rockefeller Jr.'s sons, many of them, one of them, Nelson Rockefeller, was vice president to Gerald Ford. Let's see here. And a few of his other sons, they never, one of them was really good. He had his own career into banking, and the rest of them, kind of made their way like a normal person in society and stuff. But it's very hard. I was noticing with Rockefeller, and every generation after that, there was never that business instinct or that person that was like Rockefeller. I guess it's one in a generation or whatever. But it's very. I mean, you could pass on family wealth, but those sometimes it's do the people like your family members really appreciate what you had to do to get there, and can they sustain it? And I think Rockefeller Jr. and maybe the family in that part of his family did good. I mean, other branches of his kids, not so much. They did not handle the wealth as as well as you would think as somebody that was getting taught under Rockefeller. So I'm just kind of rambling there, but guys, yeah, it's very interesting that it's very hard to teach the lessons and to your kids and to your grandkids through what you went through if they don't experience them themselves in life. So, all right, guys, let me get into the company real quick because there's a lot of back in early 1900s, Rockefeller had the press was brand new, kind of like the internet and stuff today where we get information so quick. Well, when newsprint was getting printed back then, it was so quick. And Rockefeller was kind of a guy that never wanted to be in the public, always wanted to keep comments, to themselves, and that kind of hurt him early because stories by Ida Turnbull and stuff, they were just basically bashing Rockefeller for anything, and he was silent. And we know nowadays, Rockefeller found this out later, after he retired, that you need a publicist, you need someone to fight back in the media, because otherwise the public, they get one side of something and they're just going to flow to it, especially if it's, the man's rich and he's stealing from us or something. Yeah, people love to, hear that, and like they're getting taken advantage of and all this kind of stuff. So yeah, the press was pretty interesting, and then, Rockefeller's company, Standard Oil, it kind of led to a lot of changes. Some were good and some were bad. One of them was, now we take corporations for granted where they can have, in one state and they can do business in all the states. Well, back in Rockefeller's day, he had to have a trust in each state that he was working in. So it looked like, oh, what is he doing? Is he really following the law that, and it was just a big mess when nowadays, that law is kind of like, you have a corporation and you go. Now, Rockefeller did want a monopoly because he felt that, the oil market was a little bit too crazy on its fluctuations of prices, and he thought that having one, constant thing, he could keep prices low, keep his workers, knowing that they would have a job and there wouldn't be the fluctuations in the market. But also, it kind of hurts it doesn't help lead to competition, and that can, it's not really what capitalism is about and stuff. So, yeah, I do think Rockefeller went overboard, definitely with his monopoly, but he kind of did it in a fair way. He never, the prices that Rockefeller had after he created Standard Oil were lowest in the world and lowest anywhere, and you could find them. But overall, I could see where a monopoly is not good for business or the overall long run. So, guys, getting into Standard Oil a little more, Rockefeller, you got to remember back in the 1800s, Rockefeller and Standard Oil were innovative. They were like the Steve Jobs of this era. The Union used to haul barrels by horseback and buggies, and they would be dropping oil, and it would be so inefficient to move it to a storage from Pennsylvania. Standard Oil came up with the pipeline and the big storage cases for oil. And of course, the unions didn't like this, and they would, sabotage stuff like that. They'd sabotage the oil pipelines. And then Rockefeller, they came up with the trains with the oil tankers in there. And, it was just a lot of innovation. One thing about John D. was in Ohio, the oil stunk. It had like a bad smell to it, and no one really wanted to burn it. But John D. bought it up at rock bottom prices, and he hired, some German scientists, U.S. scientists, and he's like, I think we can figure out a way to burn this without the smell. And of course, they found out a way to do that. So these are all things that John D. did that was, risk-taking, because even people in his Standard Oil company on a few of the things, they didn't want to do it. And he volunteered to put his own money up, and finally, they agreed to do what Rockefeller wanted. And it was just interesting how Rockefeller took every case and anything he did in business or life. He'd always get both points of view, and he always seemed to make the right decision. And it was pretty, it's an interesting book. And Rockefeller, like I said, it's very hard to pass down those kind of things to your next, to your generation, to your kids and stuff, and have them have your values and think how you think, because it doesn't happen like that. And so, yeah, very interesting in that regard. All right, guys, other characteristics that I wanted to mention in this book or with the company after I think it was in the early 1900s, 1910, when the government went after Standard Oil and broke up the monopoly. Standard Oil of New Jersey was Exxon. Standard Oil of New York was Mobil. Standard Oil of California was Chevron. And overall, there was like the Seven Sisters. Like Conoco was one of his companies. I think either Shell or BP bought up Standard Oil of Ohio. So Rockefeller did have all those companies were his, at one time. And actually, the ruling by the government, to put all these companies into, and they ended up having to go public and stuff. Rockefeller got a lot of stock in each one, even though he couldn't control it no more. He did, because he did have partial ownership through stocks in all these companies, and so that was very interesting in that regard, and how much wealth he actually made when the company got broke up. It kind of reminds me of a way in Warren Buffett. If he would actually break up Berkshire Hathaway, he probably would have more money than if Berkshire was all together. So it's just an interesting thing to look at. Also, guys, like I said, it's just a very fascinating read with Rockefeller. If you get a chance, it is a big book. It is, and stuff like that. But I guarantee you'll learn something from this book and you'll like it. And I hope you guys watched it. I really don't have too much more I wanted to say. I mean, like I said, I just thought I learned a lot from the book, and you really get another side of Rockefeller in this book. You get both sides. I like how the author, he showed everything that was bad, and then he talked about things that were good. And overall, like I said, I can't complain. I really liked Ron Chernow's book, and there's another book I think I want to read of his about J.P. Morgan and stuff later, so maybe I'll look into that. So guys, hope you enjoyed the biography review, and thanks for watching BSF.